Good afternoon, everyone. It is Monday, March the 16th, 2020. It is currently 2:28 p.m. Central Time. I'm coming to you live from Victory Baptist Church. And in just a few minutes, we're going to be doing a sermon review. Someone in my church sent me a sermon that was preached yesterday in Abilene, Texas at a church. And I told her that I was going to watch it, that I was going to listen to it. And I thought, well, if I'm going to watch it, I'm going to listen to it, then why not watch it and listen to it live on the air where I can just give my reaction to the sermon. We'll see how they handled it, how they handled the text. And we'll see where, whenever I do a sermon review, I don't listen to it first. I like to listen to it live on the air so that my reaction is in real time. Nothing is rehearsed. Nothing is planned. It's very organic. It's very legit. And hopefully it benefits, because sometimes I'll hear something and go, oh, wait, let's stop and consider this. So we'll see where we end up. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. But for this particular sermon review, I do have someone who will be, sitting here with me. His name, tell everyone who you are. Come here, talk in the microphone.
Seriously?
Yeah, seriously. Come over here. Come talk in the microphone. Tell everyone who you are, how old you are.
I'm 7 years old.
And what's your name?
Landon.
And where do you go to school, Landon?
Wiley Elementary School.
Why are you not in school today, Landon?
Because of the coronavirus.
Coronavirus, yes. And how long are you going to be out of school?
All this week.
All of this week and possibly?
Next week.
Yes. Are you worried about the coronavirus?
Yes.
Are you concerned about it being here?
Yes.
Yes. Are you paying attention to the news about the coronavirus?
I'm trying to.
All right. Are you going to sit here and listen to this sermon with me?
Yes.
All right. Well, you sit down. All right, so that's what we're going to do. That was Landon. That was his podcast debut. But yes, we are going to be listening to a sermon. And the reason we're going to be listening to this sermon is unless you were away on another planet, yesterday was a very, very, very interesting day for churches all across the United States of America. Yeah, because of the coronavirus, churches everywhere But basically, they were canceling their services as far as people coming to the church. And then what they were doing, they were live streaming or recording their messages to be posted on the internet. So a lot of churches were scrambling to figure out how to live stream. A lot of churches were trying to scramble to figure out how to get their sermons recorded. A lot of churches were scrambling, just trying to decide what to do. Do we cancel? Do we not cancel? In some situations, churches really didn't have a lot of options, because in some states, they were basically handing out, basically saying, look, if you have a gathering of 200, 250, you cannot have a service. You're going to have to close down. Other places did not have that restriction, but you were still concerned about people coming in, people passing, people possibly being infected with the virus or not knowing that they've been infected and spreading it to other people. Pastors were in a very difficult situation. Leadership boards, pastors were struggling. What do we do? How do we do this? And so a lot of pastors who, when they decided if they either live streamed or if they had a service, many pastors felt that it was their responsibility and a need to address the whole subject of COVID-19, the coronavirus, a global pandemic. How should Christians respond? What is a biblical approach? How we should think about this? And many pastors felt that, hey, that's what the whole world is talking about. I need to address this in some way, shape, or form. Other pastors were like, absolutely not. Don't waste your time from the pulpit talking about COVID-19. You need to give them an expositional passage on, Leviticus 6. You need to, and I understand what they were trying to say, that, hey, we should still preach the Word of God and focus on the Word of God and not get caught up with this. But when the whole world is thinking about it, the one thing we as pastors need to worry about is trying to ensure that our people are thinking biblically about whatever is going on in the world. And we have to address what is going on in the world at times. That doesn't mean that should be the normal way we preach. Yeah, I believe in exegetical preaching verse by verse through books. Yes, I believe that's important to do. But there are times we need to talk about what's happening around us, address it, give people a biblical perspective, because we we are constantly complaining within Christianity that Christians do not have a Christian worldview and they don't think biblically. Well, the only way they're going to have a Christian worldview and think biblically is when you take what's happening in the world and talk about it from a biblical theological perspective. So a lot of pastors did that. And before we listen to this sermon, I want to I think we need to talk about this. I think it's important. I think this is important. I think that because I'm witnessing a lot of this. We have a lot of Christians who are, how can you say it? They think that this is the time to act super spiritual, be condescending, and tell anyone who raises any questions about COVID-19 that they don't have enough faith and they're ungodly. And if any church cancels a service for COVID-19, boom, they are ungodly, they're compromising, they're caving to the world. And even if they live in a state where they're saying, hey, you cannot have a gathering more than, 200 people and you have a church bigger than 200 people, even if they say, okay, we're not going to have a service, you're still seeing websites and different bloggers attacking these churches saying, you're not spiritual, you're not spiritual, you're not spiritual. Can we stop that nonsense? All right? Churches are going to have to make the best decisions possibly. You're not any more spiritual by, we're going to prove everyone wrong by having a church service during the middle of a global pandemic. You're not any more spiritual by having a church service, and you're not any more spiritual by canceling a church service. You've got to make rational decisions. This is not the time to try to come across as we're so spiritual because we had church. We're not, or they're not spiritual because they didn't cancel services and they don't care about people. We've got to stop this. This is not the time for Christians to start fighting one another over who's more spiritual based off something they do, based off some work that they perform. That's not the time to try to brag about how spiritually we are by our fleshly actions and our fleshly activities. That's really unbiblical. It's ungodly. It's pharisaical. It's acting like the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And it makes us look like kids on the playground trying to brag about who's stronger or who's faster. That's not the way this should work. So let's make this very clear. There are churches that, listen, we're in the middle of a global pandemic. And if you're in a situation, and if you're in a city or a state that says, hey, if you have more than this many people, you can't have a service, this is not a time to start crying Christian persecution. Because they are going after all gatherings. They're shutting down bars. They're shutting down movie theaters. They're shutting down restaurants. They're shutting down concerts. This is not attacking Christianity. Now, yeah, it makes me nervous whenever the government steps in and has to do this, but this is unprecedented what we're witnessing. We have a global pandemic, and they are trying to stop the spread of this, and they're trying to get this somewhat under control. And so, therefore, they're going to have to do certain things. If you're in a situation where your church has to cancel, are told to cancel, that doesn't stop the word of God from being preached. Every church can do what I'm doing right here, right now. I'm sitting here in Victory Baptist Church in an empty sanctuary with a microphone on, broadcasting live on the internet. All churches can perform that. They can do that. They can teach Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So if you have to cancel, or if you feel that it's the right thing to do because you do not want anyone in your congregation being infected with this virus with COVID-19 because they came to church, and you're like, I'm going to try to protect people, which pastors are supposed to try to protect their people. They're going to look out after their people, and they're going to make those hard decisions. Then be supportive of your pastor. Right now, be supportive of your pastor. This is not a time for criticism. This is not a time for you acting like that you're so spiritual, you're so brave, and so you're going to criticize. You're going to try to get other members of the church to get upset at the pastor because he canceled services. Please, it's so nonsensical and it's so ungodly. And here's another thing that is just driving me crazy about this. All these churches are having all kinds of like, what do we do? Do we cancel? Do we not cancel? Do we cancel? Do we? And like they're like feel like that this is some major crisis and trying to figure out what to do. I find it somewhat humorous because churches will cancel preaching services for pretty much everything. I've seen churches cancel services for potlucks, for fellowships, for church picnic, for the Super Bowl. They cancel services for everything, but all of a sudden during the middle of a global pandemic, the concept of canceling a church service seems like it's foreign. We would never do that. Well, I've seen churches cancel services for almost anything and everything. Churches cancel services because of bad weather. They cancel for activities. They cancel for all kinds of things. So churches that cancel for all kinds of things, I don't know why they act like this is such a big deal. If you have to cancel, you cancel, but that doesn't mean you have to stop the preaching of God's word. Doesn't mean you cannot continue to teach, continue to disciple, continue to instruct, to continue to equip. You just do so in a different way. Yes, you'll have to do so through the use of technology. And then you can come up with other ways to ensure that the church is operating carefully. I think many churches are concerned ultimately financially. No church service means no offering. No offering can mean, for some churches that are living week to week or functioning week to week, that could be a major concern. But you can't place money before the safety of people. Now, I say all of that because, as I said earlier, many churches yesterday addressed the COVID-19, the coronavirus, the global pandemic in their sermons. And and again, some wanted to act super spiritual and go, well, I didn't preach on COVID-19 because we're more godly than you who did. Look, the pulpit needs to be the place to address issues that are happening, that are impacting their people. And we want people to think biblically and scripturally, well, same thing, biblically and have a Christian worldview in regards to whatever's happening in the world. And right now, the thing that everyone's talking about is COVID-19. And we need Christians who are not on social media saying nonsense, but are being salt and light. And I think addressing it from the pulpit was a more than acceptable thing to do. So this sermon that was sent to me comes from a church in Abilene where they addressed the global pandemic. And they did so by using the book of Romans. So what we're going to do is we're going to listen to the sermon. I will break in as I feel the need to. If you don't know how these sermon reviews work, as I stated at the beginning, I don't listen to it before. Nothing's rehearsed. Nothing is planned. Organic reaction. I am not going to give you the name of the church. I'm not going to give you the name of the pastor because the goal of sermon reviews are not to bash or to humiliate or to make fun or mock or anything like that. It's to simply say, hey, let's listen to a sermon and then let's talk about it. The good, the bad, the ugly, whatever's in it. And in many cases, we kind of just say, that's an interesting concept. And we kind of leave the sermon and open up a Bible and just kind of follow it ourselves. It's just a time to focus again on the Word of God. And it gives us an opportunity to hear how another church handled the global pandemic and the COVID-19 outbreak. All right. Are you ready? Are you ready, Landon?
Yes.
All right. Landon is ready. I'm ready. Here we go. Sermon review time. Let's listen.
Psalm 46 says, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth gives way. Well, as you know, COVID-19 is seemingly taking over our world. Reactions have ranged from apathy and indifference to sheer terror and panic, and we don't want to be either of those. As I said in my letter that went out yesterday, we canceled service for the sake of loving our neighbors, especially those that are most at risk. And it was an extremely difficult decision, a very weighty decision for us. But we don't lose a ton. We can still hear the word and sing together. You get to stay in your PJs. I don't have to sit and watch Tim Schmidt fall asleep during my sermon. And so we'll keep our elderly and our immunocompromised people safe and see what the Lord.
And I respect what he just said there about, canceling services out of love for your neighbor, out of love for one another. That's I've said it again and again and again and again. What I have missed through seeing and witnessing and listening and reading what so many Christians have said is they are completely missing the point. This is not the opportunity for you to try to look like you are super saint and that you are super spiritual and everyone ain't. This is the time for you to show love to your neighbor and to consider others before yourself, to be salt and light. It's not time for you to try to prove some point against the government, prove some point against liberals, prove some point against whatever you may perceive as unwarranted panic. It's time to take precaution to show love for other people, which I think that's in the Bible. So I respect the fact that this church took the necessary precautions. They are a large church. This is a large church that we're listening to. The sermon that is coming from a large church. So definitely they would have to cancel. And some people may ask, well, why did you have services? We're a very small church. So that's why. But we will cancel services. We were going to take each service, we're going to take it step by step. And if a service arises and I feel the need to, we will cancel. But guess what? I'm going to drive right here to this church, open the front door, turn on the mic, and preach and teach as every opportunity as I have. And that's what all pastors and churches should be doing. So their motivation here is right. Let's see now how they handle the text. And that Psalm 46 passage, I was going to use that yesterday as well, but I went a different direction. But let's see where they go. Supposedly they're going to the book of Romans. So I'm very interested to see where they go.
Lord has for us the rest of the week. The question I want us to talk about is, how shall the people of God respond? And God has a word. So I would love for you to grab a Bible, get it out, open it up to the book of Romans. If you've been with us, you know we've been walking through the book of Romans together, and so I want us to spend some time here just considering 6 truths from Romans to remind ourselves during such times. 6 truths to remind ourselves of during such times, and then we'll finish with 3 applications. So 6 truths. Number 1, what does Romans have to say to us during such times? Number 1, the world is fallen. The world is broken, all of it. Every nook, every cranny, the creation is cursed. And we know it didn't start that way. The Bible starts in Genesis chapter 1. God created the world good, but because of sin, the world is cursed. The world is fallen. Times like these remind us of this. A pandemic reminds us of the instability of the world as we know it. And Romans teaches this. Romans chapter 8, verse 18, if you want to turn there with me. Romans chapter 8, verse 18. For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us. For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the sons of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to corruption and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now. And not only the creation, but we ourselves who have the first fruits of the Spirit groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for adoption as sons, the redemption of our bodies. Here we learn very clearly that the entire created world is broken, it's fallen, it's under a curse, it's subjected to futility. And so these types of things should not surprise us. I think the stability of modern America can sometimes blind us to the brokenness of the world. But a pandemic is a painful reminder of the curse. So we learn we ought not to be surprised by such things. The whole created world is under the curse. Number 1, that's it. The world's fallen. Number 2, Romans.
Now that's a very good point. Using the book of Romans to address this, interesting. We too are in the book of Romans. I thought about looking for the book of Romans and like, hey, let's go through the book of Romans and kind of the same idea crossed my mind, but I was afraid, wait a minute, we're trying to go verse by verse through Romans. I don't want to just start grabbing some verses from Romans and trying to do this. But that's a very valid point. You could have spent the whole sermon talking about this, but it is very important for people to remember the reason this is happening is we live in a fallen world. We live in a fallen world that is subject to vanity, subject to these kinds of pandemics, to disease, to death. Death, suffering is a part of creation, is part of the fallen world. And yes, we should not be shocked by it. We should not be surprised by it. And yes, that is a very good point, a valid point. And Could have spent more time on it. And it's, again, an interesting approach using the book of Romans. So, all right, good point. Let's see where else he goes. So there's number one. We live in a fallen world. Very good point. Very true. Let's see where else he goes.
Tells us, reminds us that we are fallen. We are sinful. And Romans is extremely clear about this. Romans chapter 1, right out of the gates, teaches us that we are idolaters, all of us before Christ. Exchange the immortal God for created things. We love other things in place of God. Romans 1 says we worship them and we serve them. And there's nothing like a pandemic to expose idols, to expose our functional God replacements, to shake our foundations and cause us to ask, what is it, who is it we're truly living for? We're fallen. Romans is crystal clear about that. Romans 1, let me read from Romans 3, verse 9. Turn over there.
Now, this is interesting because if his goal is to teach Christians how to respond to a pandemic, how to think about a pandemic, if his goal is to try to give Christians a Christian worldview about the pandemic, it is an interesting, hey, this teaches you that you're fallen. Hey, this teaches you, I don't know if that's really, like, understanding that the world is fallen is a very important part of understanding suffering, global suffering, from a philosophical perspective. Why is there suffering? We live in a fallen world. That is helpful in how to understand a pandemic and how to respond to a pandemic. Being told, hey, you're a sinner, you're fallen. Let's see where he takes this. I don't really know now. Now it kind of seems like he's just going to slide over into a typical, gospel presentation, which is perfectly okay. But if your goal is a gospel presentation, then don't really present it like you're trying to tell people how to think and respond in a pandemic. I don't know. It's kind of to me, it's kind of a detour from what I thought the intended purpose was, but maybe he'll bring it back to it. We will see. But yes, we are sinners. I agree. And I do agree the book of Romans teach that we're all sinners. I agree.
Romans 3:9. What then? Are we Jews any better off? No, not at all, for we have already charged that both Jews and Greeks, that's Jews and non-Jews, that's everybody, are under sin. As it is written, and here he quotes tons of Psalms and biblical passages to show none is righteous, no, not one, no one understands, no one seeks for God, all have turned aside, together they've become worthless, no one does good, not even one. And then if we kept reading in chapter 3, look down at verse 23. All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. We're sinful. And times like these show us the world's fallenness. I saw a couple days ago that one of the major pornography sites was offering free premium access to people in Italy. Disgusting and despicable. Our sin is showing as our foundations are shown to be faulty. People are brawling over Charmin. Panic, producing a mob mentality. We're sinful. We're fallen. And we also learn, just like the created order, even our very bodies are fallen. Sin has cursed every nook and cranny, as I mentioned. Bad backs to cancer. Our immune systems do not work like they should. They fail us, and sin is the reason. The wages of sin is death. We are fallen. The world is not the way it's supposed to be. Number 2. Number 3, Romans teaches us that our greatest problem has been taken care of. We are fallen, but through Christ we forgiven.
Yes, now we can kind of see where this is going. He's turning this into just pretty much a straightforward. He's using the pandemic, COVID-19, as an opportunity to basically present the gospel. We live in a fallen world. We're sinners, but our greatest problem has been taken care of by Jesus Christ. Straightforward gospel presentation. Nothing obviously wrong with it. Some would say that that's what should be done. Some would argue that what I did yesterday was unbiblical and what he is doing is biblical. Again, everyone will judge everyone's preaching. I will say it's perfectly acceptable to present the gospel in this situation. Perfectly okay. If your goal is to help your people think biblically about the pandemic and to help Christians respond biblically about the pandemic, then what he's doing is not ultimately helpful, because what he should do is give everyone the information about the virus, what's going on, how it's spreading, some basic information about it, and then how we should respond to it biblically, how we should think about it. So understanding that we live in a fallen world would be critical to a Christian worldview in regards to the pandemic. These other things are more about a gospel presentation. So I guess it's what your purpose is. If your purpose is to preach the gospel, then good. If your purpose is to help your people think biblically about a global situation, then you would have to decide which way is the right way to go. But let's finish this.
Our greatest problem is not the coronavirus. Our greatest problem is not a recession. Our greatest problem is the wrath of God that we deserve because of our sin. Romans starts off that way. Romans chapter 1, verse 18. The wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. That's our problem. That's our fundamental problem. Romans teaches that. Romans also teaches that Jesus is the solution. After laying out how sinful we are in Romans 1 and Romans 2 and then in Romans 3, as we just read, he turns a corner and he turns from the bad news to the good news. And the good news is not really good until we have reckoned with the bad news. And in verse 21 of chapter 3, look there with me. It says, but now the righteousness of God has been manifested apart from the law, although the law and the prophets bear witness to it, the righteousness of God through faith in Jesus Christ for all who believe. For there is no distinction, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God and are justified, declared in the right by his grace as a gift through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus, whom God put forward as a propitiation by his blood to be received by faith. This was to show God's righteousness, because in his divine forbearance he had passed over former sins. It was to show his righteousness at the present time so that he might be just and the justifier of the one who has faith in Jesus. There's this word here that's used several times in the Bible. It's in verse 25, and it's this word propitiation. Maybe you remember us talking about it. It's a really important word. It's this word that means a sacrifice that averts wrath, a sacrifice that absorbs wrath. Here it says that God, out of love, put forth his Son to be a propitiation. Romans 1:18 begins with our problem. What is our fundamental problem? Our sin has caused God's wrath to be revealed against us. Here in chapter 3, he tells us the solution. God has put forward his Son, Jesus Christ, to be that sacrifice that averts it, that absorbs it. In our place, God's wrath is no longer upon us because Jesus bore it. Our propitiation. He took our place, took care of our sin problem. He removed our guilt. He has justified us, declared us in the right by faith and not by works. Declared us in the right because of what Jesus has done for us, not by our own performance. This is grace. This is the gospel. Our sins forgiven through faith in Jesus Christ. Look at Romans chapter 4, verse 4. It says, now to the one who works, his wages are not counted as a gift, but as his due. And to the one who does not work, but believes in him who justifies the ungodly, his faith is counted as righteousness. Just as David also speaks of the blessing of the one to whom God counts righteousness apart from works. And he quotes the Psalms here. Blessed are those whose lawless deeds are forgiven and whose sins are covered. Blessed is the man against whom the Lord will not count his sin. Look at the next page there, chapter 5, verse 9. Since, therefore, we've now been justified by his blood, much more shall we be saved by him from the wrath of God. For if while we were enemies, we were reconciled to God by the death of his Son, much more now that we are reconciled shall we be saved by his life. More than that, we also rejoice in God through our Lord Jesus Christ, through whom we have now received reconciliation. Then in the next chapter, chapter 6, verse 23. Familiar passage. The wages of sin is death. That's what we've earned. But the free gift of God is eternal life in Christ Jesus our Lord. That is not what we've earned. But by grace, that's what we receive through faith. Your greatest problem is judgment. And Jesus Christ bore the judgment in our place. Number 4, God is sovereign. We learn from Romans that God is sovereign. Romans teaches us that God is on his throne. Romans 8:28. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good for those who are called according to his purpose. For those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, in order that he might be the firstborn among many brothers. And those whom he predestined, he also called. And those whom he called, he also justified. Those whom he justified, he also glorified. God works all things. All things. The good days and the bad days. Our great God is at work on our behalf, and he tells us it's for our good. And our good may look different than we might want it to look. But through whatever it may be that God's bringing us through, he promises here that the good that he will bring about is conformity to his Son. We will become more like Jesus because of the sovereign work of God. And we got to remind ourselves of this. Maybe that we have to remind ourselves of this through tears, on our knees, curled up. God is sovereign. He's not surprised by this. Ephesians 1 says he works out all things according to the counsel of his will. Our God is powerful.
Now, this is where sometimes I have problems with the American church. Yes, God is sovereign. I completely believe that. But the way we present it is we always present it with a very positive spin. We never stop to go, hey, wait a minute. This raises some questions. This raises some philosophical questions that we have to struggle with. God is sovereign. He works all things according to his will, i.e., the coronavirus, COVID-19, is a part of his sovereign will. He's allowing it. He's preordained it. He's decreed it. It's occurring. Then you have to address that issue. But what Christians do, they throw out these concepts, and then the people sitting in the pew will hop on the internet and say, God is sovereign, God is sovereign, God is working everything out, all things work together for good. And then people look at that and going, okay, so thousands of people dying is good? Thousands of people dying is wonderful. Your God is doing this. Your God is controlling this. Your God is not going to stop the death of all of these people. This is a global pandemic. How bad could it get? So even if we forget COVID-19, we can go back to other global pandemics where 40, 50, millions upon millions of people died. God was in control. God allowed that to happen. There are going to be some people who have some tough questions. But what we do is we present it in like this very positive spin, and then Christians go throw that out there. We've got to address the 25-ton elephant standing in the room. Well, wait a minute. Okay, so God is sovereign. God is in control. He works all things according to the counsel of his will. Then he does this. So somehow it's God's will for people to die from a horrible virus. Okay. Now, yes, you can say that, and I'm not arguing that that's not biblical, because I believe in God's sovereignty completely. I believe God's sovereignty even in regards to salvation. I truly believe in God's sovereignty. However, we have to address the issue and at least say this is as much comfort as it supposedly brings. It brings lots of hard questions to answer, and it's not always so easy. It's not always so easy to simply say, God works all things out, all things work together for good. All things work together for good. Hey, your family member has a coronavirus and is on a respirator and is dying. Hey, all things work together for good. We just throw it out there like it's supposed to make everyone feel better. No, it raises some deep, hard philosophical questions. And it's just weird how Christians sometimes present it like it's the greatest news in the world. Hey, great news, everyone. There's a global pandemic. Thousands of people are dead. We don't know when we're going to reach the peak of this. We don't know how many people are ultimately going to be infected. There are predictions of, over 1 million people being infected. We don't know how many people ultimately will be. We don't know how many people are going to die. So let's say this continues on for 6 more weeks, and let's say we reach a staggering number of deaths. Let's say we reach a number of let's just say I'll just pick a random number. Let's say we reach 2 million dead. Let's say we reach that number. It would be frightening and crazy to witness. 2 million people die. And then you go back and listen to this sermon. Hey, all things work together for good. God's sovereign. God's sovereign. God is on the throne. And I'm just saying it comes across very almost as if it's unwilling to acknowledge the reality of a situation. Right? Hey, Hitler slaughtered 6 million people. God's on the throne. God's sovereign. It's like it doesn't match the tone of tragedy. You know what I'm saying? Those little catchphrases don't sometimes meet the tone of true tragedy and true devastation and death. Not saying it's not true. I'm saying we just have to realize that when we say that, we have to be willing to deal with the questions that arise from it. We have to anticipate those questions. We have to anticipate the reality, and we have to acknowledge exactly what we are saying. We have to acknowledge that. And sometimes Christians, on one hand, want to say, God is sovereign, God is on the throne, and then turn around and say, but God's not but then they want to say, God's not responsible for this. Blame Satan, blame the devil, so on one hand, they want to say, God is sovereign, God is on the throne, he works everything out according to the counsel of his will, and then immediately will go, but, don't blame God, don't blame God. And it's like this weird game that sometimes Christians play. Like they'll say that, and then when they get confronted with the ugly reality, so you're actually saying that God wants all of these people to die? Well, no, I'm not saying that. Okay, well, what are you saying? I think sometimes we throw this out in we throw this out like it's the cure-all. It's the answer to all of everyone's problems. And I don't think it's always that easy. But let's see. Maybe he will address that here in a minute. Remember, that's always the problem with doing these sermon reviews, because I don't know where he's going. So sometimes I stop to just share what my mind is thinking. And he may come right back and completely handle it the way I'm thinking. So we'll give him the benefit of the doubt right now. We'll see where he goes. But that's the thing. I mean, when you listen to sermons, you do the same thing. When I watch anything, I do the same thing. So here are the thoughts that I'm having. I'm like, man, obviously he's in an empty sanctuary. But if I would have been there, I would have raised my hand and go, wait. Well, I wouldn't during the middle of a sermon. But after the sermon, I would like, okay, so you acknowledge that therefore God is the one doing this, and this, and that what we're saying. And it would be interesting to see if he would go, yes, that's what I'm saying. It's not pretty. It's not nice, but yeah, that's what I'm saying. Or if he would just be like, no, but, and then try to get God off the hook for it. It's just this weird dynamic that I witness within Christianity on a too frequent basis. But let's see where he goes with this.
Isaiah 46:9, remember the former things. Remember, the former thing is old. He says, for I am God, there is no other. I am God, there is none like me, declaring the end from the beginning, from ancient times, things not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will accomplish all my purpose. Daniel 4 says, his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are accounted as nothing, and he does according to his will among the hosts of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth, and none can stay his hand or say to him, what have you done? God is in control, friends. Let's remember this. Let's act like this. Number 5, not only is he powerful and sovereign.
All right. And he moved on really quick. Hey, guys, let's remember it and act like it. God is in control. All right. That's fine. You tell everyone that, and then be prepared for someone to go, oh, so your God is in control and he's not stopping it, and people are continuing to die. So that means he wants these people to die. He wants this virus to spread. Hey, God is in control. All right, yes, my daughter was murdered yesterday. Yeah, well, God is in control. So what are you saying? Like you've got to address the philosophical problems that arise from such a claim. And I know when I say you have to address this, pastors are like, no, the pulpit's not the place to address this. Well, it's got to be the place to address it during the middle of a global pandemic. It's a global pandemic. People are having questions. Right? I've already seen on a number of news articles where some Christian will pop up, God is in control, God's in charge. And then people are like, well, could you tell your God to stop killing people? Could you tell God, hey, oh, God, your God is in control? Could you tell people and they throw out some number, how many children were molested this year? Could you tell him to stop that? And it's like Christians don't ever anticipate that. This is a great truth to believe. God is sovereign. God is in control. God is all powerful. I believe that because I believe the Bible teaches it. But I'm also willing to acknowledge it places us in a very, 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 very difficult position to understand how that works. God is sovereign. God is in control. He works everything out. His will is going to be done. The counsel of his will, nothing can stop it. Nothing can move it. All right, great. Let's look at what's happening in the world. Let's look at the situation in Syria. Yeah, not good. Let's look at, rape, murder, all that. Wait. And so then, now it would be interesting to know if he just acknowledges that or if he does this, I call it sovereign modification. He's sovereign when everything works out good. He's not so sovereign when everything goes horribly wrong. Okay. But when we see in the book of Job, God was, ultimately in charge of that entire situation. He set the entire situation up, and he used Satan as a tool to cause all those horrible things. And I know what Christians will say, but look at the end of the book. Everything worked out great. Yeah, the end of the book, Job still didn't get his children who died back because they were dead. All right. So that something to consider. It always bothers me that, in the middle of a global crisis, Christians we've got our you can almost anticipate the Bible verses Christians are going to quote and I tend to refer to them as the pat answers they're going to give. We've got to struggle with that difficulty. I don't like it. I struggle with it, and I don't have a good answer for it. But it's the reality of the situation, and we've got to make sure that when we state it, that we accept that responsibility of what we are saying and not just wrap it up in a nice little bow and make it look so wonderful, and everyone then takes it in the church and then throws it out on social media, not realizing how utterly foolish, and at times it almost sounds cruel and insane that you would say that, especially in the midst of people suffering, right? So just a thought. I was hoping he was going to deal with it, but he moved on relatively quick. Hey guys, just remember, God is sovereign. God is in charge. Now act like it. And what he means by act like it means trust God. But he's not going to deal with how to handle the difficult questions that many atheists and skeptics are going to be raising right now as we speak, and they're raising them in the comment section of all kinds of news articles. They're basically mocking Christians. We at least need to address the issue. All right, let's see what else he has to say.
Sovereign. He's faithful. In so many ways, that's the message of the book of Romans, about the fact that God keeps his promises, specifically his promises made to the patriarchs. We read in Romans 4 about how God has kept his promises to Abraham. Flip over to Romans chapter 15 towards the end of the book. 15 verse 8. I tell you that Christ, the Messiah, became a servant to the circumcised to show God's truthfulness in order to confirm the promises given to the patriarchs and in order that the Gentiles might glorify God for his mercy. This is the purpose of Romans. This is what we're in right now as a church, taking a break from Romans 9 to 11 to show that God keeps his promises. Romans chapter 9 verse 6 starts that whole section to say God's word has not failed because, friends, God's word cannot fail. He is faithful. He can be relied upon. His promises are true. He can be trusted. He's faithful. The sixth thing that we can learn from Romans about a pandemic is that the future is brighter than ever. There's yet so much we don't know about this virus or the implications of it, but we know someone who does. And if terrible days are ahead of us, the future is ultimately bright. We know the end of the story. If this gets bad, or regardless of how bad it gets, for Christians, our best days are always ahead. Let me remind you that the very worst thing that can happen to you, if you are a believer in Jesus Christ, in truth, is the very best thing that can happen to you. And again, God promises to even use the hard days for our good. Romans chapter 5, verse 1. Therefore, since we have been justified by faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. Through him, we have also obtained access by faith into this grace in which we stand, and we rejoice in the hope of the glory of God. Not only that, but we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope, and hope does not put us to shame because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who's been given to us. So church, stay close to Jesus. One day, God's going to right all wrongs. He's going to free the world from the vestiges of the curse. As we sing at Christmas time, he comes to make his blessings flow far as the curse is found. How far is the curse found? We've already seen everywhere. Well, he's going to fix that. He's going to make all wrongs right one day. And Romans tells us that in Romans chapter 8, verse 20. Speak of the glory that will be revealed. The creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to corruption and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now, and not only the creation, but we ourselves who have the first fruits of the Spirit groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for adoption as sons, the redemption of our bodies. We're talking about resurrection. He says, for in this hope we were saved. Now, hope that is seen is not hope, for who hopes for what he sees? But if we hope for what we do not see, we wait for it with patience. God is going to make all things right. Ultimately, our future is incredibly bright. Those are 6 truths to encourage us from Romans. Now, let's close then with 3 applications. Number 1, love. In light of the gospel, we are called as the people of God to cruciform love, to cross-shaped love. Romans turns a corner in chapter 12 from all of the gospel theology of Romans 1 to 11, and then in 12:1, therefore, because of all that, we are then to offer our lives. Flip over to Romans 13. The heart of that offering is sacrificial love. He says in chapter 13, verse 8, owe no one anything except to love each other. For the one who loves another has fulfilled the law. For the commandment, you shall not commit adultery, shall not murder, shall not steal, shall not covet. Any other commandment, they're summed up in this one word, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no wrong to a neighbor, therefore love is the fulfilling of the law. And it's got a Jesus shape to it. Look over the next page at chapter 15. We who are strong have an obligation.
I was sitting here and I was about to start laughing because when I listen to preachers who preach like this, I have to ask myself, could I ever do this? He is so calm and so just, I don't know. I couldn't talk about golf in such a calm, low, like, I don't even know how you describe. I'm trying to just do it right now, and I can't even do it right. And I can't do it. I don't know how my personality is. It doesn't matter what I'm talking about. I'm going to talk about it like I'm excited, like I don't know, like I'm mad, like I'm angry, like I'm upset. Like there's going to be every emotion is going to come through my voice, and it's going to be from shock, surprise, anger, excitement. No, this, and so maybe for people who like that kind of pastor, that's great. It's like, come on, man. We're talking about a global pandemic. We're talking about the Bible. Come on. Give me some energy. Come on. Wake up. Okay, come on. But but that's the thing. Everyone's different. Every style is different. One is not better than another. There's no I'm not criticizing that. It's just I'm just sitting there listening going, man, I am interested. I'm hoping that maybe in the application he's going to get to Romans 13 in regards to, he is in Romans 13 now, but that's not where he's going. Romans chapter 13, maybe he's going to get to this, but I was kind of waiting for a conversation about this. Romans 13, verse 1, let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. Whoever therefore resisteth the power resisteth the ordinance of God, and they that resisteth shall receive to themselves damnation. As Christians dealing with a pandemic, you're in the book of Romans, does it teach us to submit to the earthly authority to governmental powers in regards to the pandemic, in regards to restrictions, not being able to travel, not going out, not having gatherings at a certain size? I'm interested to know. Hopefully he's going to deal with that, because if you're dealing with what Romans teaches us in regards to a pandemic, the passage I was going to first immediately go to is Romans 13, 1 and following, because the first thing it tells me is, what do I do in a global pandemic? That I am to submit to the authority, because the authority was ordained by God. Remember his sovereignty? Remember we talked about his sovereignty, or he did in the sermon? Well, God is sovereign. All power is ordained of God. We must submit to it. So, hey, members of his church, I'm not going to give the name. Hey, if the government says we have to shut down church for the next 3 months, is that a Romans 13 situation? Or is that a situation where we disobey civil authority? That's a time to have that kind of, if you're going to use Romans 13, you got to use a good portion of the sermon to address it. He may address it here in a minute. We will see. I hope so, because if not, then if he doesn't address this, then really saying what Romans teaches us in a pandemic, he's ignoring literally probably one of the most important sections in how to handle and what to do in the middle of this global pandemic. In fact, we just got new guidance from the CDC that now wants to restrict gatherings to no larger than 10 people. So that means even my church now is going to have to address this. We're going to have to figure out what we're going to do. This now is getting very serious. So we'll talk about it in another live broadcast here in just a second, but let's finish this sermon.
To bear with the failings of the weak and not to please ourselves. Let each of us please his neighbor for his good, to build him up. Why? Verse 3 starts with a really important word, for, because Christ did not please himself. We are called to love because that's what Christ has done. He shows us how we give of self for the good of others. We're not worried about ourselves. We're not here to please ourselves. We're here to love our neighbors. And so we here in America, we're being asked to change our behavior, and we will do so out of love for our neighbor. And for Christians, we ought to do this without hesitation, without grumbling. And again, this is primarily for the sake of our elderly members and our elderly neighbors and those with compromised immune systems, and for our healthcare professionals. Maybe you think this is over the top. I hope you're right. But for the sake of loving our neighbors, we will give of self. We don't want to overreact, but we also don't want to underreact. People are dying. And so while we can probably all agree about the media hype, the CDC, the World Health Organization, is taking this seriously, and therefore, so should we, partly because they're asking us to, and as Romans teaches us, if you've got it open, look at chapter 13, verse 1.
All right, good. Here he goes. I was hoping he was going to go there, and he makes a great point. We should do this without grumbling, with the idea of loving others. In fact, what he probably should have done is just turn the whole sermon into, hey, what does Romans teach us about? What does Romans teach us in a pandemic? But we live in a fallen world. Very good. If you're going to deal with the sovereignty of God, you've got to deal with the hard questions that brings up. And that what Romans teaches us is to do things in sight of loving other people. That we don't start complaining and grumbling because we can't do this or this is restricted. We do it out of love for other people. I made that point hard in my sermon yesterday. Yeah, he did it in a much calmer way. Not so blunt, not so direct, which is perfectly okay, as long as people get it. So that's good. And now he's going to Romans chapter 13, verse 1, which I am very glad he did. He just could have probably structured the sermon to focus more, instead of just really doing the gospel kind of thing. He should have probably emphasized some of these other points. If, and I stress if, his goal was to tell us how to think about this from a biblical perspective using the book of Romans. So it just comes down to a matter of what his ultimate thesis was and what he wanted to accomplish. That's really what it comes down to. But that's just being nitpicky and just listening to it. He's made some good points. The gospel is obviously greatly important. I think he downplayed or presented the sovereignty in a positive way without dealing with some of the hard questions it brings up. The love is very important, and now let's see how he handles this subjection to earthly authority.
Let every person be subject to the governing authorities. For there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. And when dealing with pandemics, the measures that will actually make a difference always need to be taken sooner than we think. People in Italy don't think we're acting too soon. So as we've been saying, let's wash our hands regularly. Let's wash them thoroughly. 20 seconds. Say the Lord's Prayer twice, then you're done. Let's cough and sneeze into our elbows with proper cough etiquette. Let's avoid contact. Let's settle for a head nod. Don't do elbow taps because we're telling people to cough into their elbow. Just shoot a deuce, not a head. Stay at home as much as possible, especially if you're sick. Love your neighbor. The goal is to flatten the curve. If you don't understand what that language means, just Google it. Love. And let's love by being careful of how we speak. Dismissive attitudes about any illness will seem callous to those who've been personally affected by it. Let's be careful with our words. Let's seek to build up and encourage and give grace. Let's ask ourselves, does this social media post, does it have the aroma of Christ? If not, delete it. Listen to Titus chapter 3, verse 1. Remind them to be submissive to rulers and authorities, to be obedient, to be ready for every good work, to speak evil of no one, to avoid quarreling, to be gentle, and to show perfect courtesy toward all people. Time's going to tell other ways we might be able to demonstrate love. One way may be contacting elderly neighbors and asking if you can run errands for them, if you can go pick up groceries. Our deacons are queued up to take care of the members of Southside. Some of you may need to give up 3 or 4 of your 250 rolls of toilet paper for someone who actually needs it. Or you can just roll like my family and go bidet all the way. Alicia would want me to tell you that's not true. We've never even tried it. I think there are going to be many ways the church will be able to rise up and cruciform love in days to come. It's interesting looking at history. This isn't new in the history of the world. And the very first Christians, when plagues would come, they wouldn't flee the city like so many would. They would stay and they would serve. And sociologists and historians have shown that at least one major contributor to the growth of the early church was their commitment to care for people, the many, many, many people stricken by plagues. And as the plague would move on and as survivors would recover, where would they want to worship? The pagan temples, whose priests went MIA at the first sign of trouble, or their neighbor's church who stayed and cared for and provided for them, even at great risk to themselves? If COVID-19 gets nastier and then eventually passes, let's ask ourselves, what will our neighbors remember of us? It should be sacrificial love. We can be beacons of hope, help, and healing. And of course, part of loving people is sharing Jesus with them. I think people are ripe for the hope of the gospel. People are scared. People are sick. People are dying. People will continue to be sick and will continue to die. People need the gospel, and so let's love our neighbors. Let's be about sharing the only real hope, the only true hope, the only lasting hope that they actually have. So that's number one, love, cruciform love. Number two, pray. The Southern Baptist Convention, the denomination of which we're a part, has asked all churches to commit to pray today. Even the president asked today a national day of prayer. And the Southern Baptist Convention has asked the churches of the Southern Baptist Convention to pray in 4 specific ways. So commit to praying in these ways and more. Number one, ask God in His mercy to stop this pandemic and to save lives. Not only in our communities, but around the world, particularly in places that are unequipped medically to deal with the virus. Second, the convention leaders are asking us to pray for the president, pray for President Donald Trump and other government leaders, international, federal, state, local, to have the wisdom to direct us in the best courses of action for prevention and care. Third, Scripture says, teach us to number our days carefully so that we may develop wisdom in our hearts. So pray that the Lord would give us wisdom in this moment of fear as the foundations of what we know are shaken, that others would realize how fragile life is, how real eternity is. They would see their need and turn to God. Fourth way they're asking us to pray is asking God to protect our missionaries and their families around the globe, using this global crisis to advance His good news to the whole world. And then I would add us to be praying for those who will be economically affected due to lack of work. So let's be a people who love. Let's be a people of prayer. And then third, fear not. We need not fear. If our greatest problem has been taken care of, if our God is all-powerful, if He's sovereign, if He's faithful, if He's good, what is there to fear? These twin truths of God's sovereignty and God's faithfulness should be like kryptonite to fear. And so do you believe this? Do you believe in this God? The God revealed in Romans? If so, we should not walk in fear. We should walk by faith and confidence in Him. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 6. Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time He may exalt you, casting all your anxieties on Him because He cares for you. Psalm 23, verse 4. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. We have no reason to fear. Martin Luther wrote a hymn. It's called A Mighty Fortress. It says this: a mighty fortress is our God, a bulwark never failing. Our helper He, amid the flood of mortal ills prevailing. For still our ancient foe doth seek to work us woe. His craft and power are great, and armed with cruel hate. On earth is not His equal. And though this world with devils filled should threaten to undo us, we will not fear, for God has willed His truth to triumph through us. Fear not. Here's how the Heidelberg Catechism opens. The first question: what is your only comfort in life and in death? What's the answer? That I am not my own, but belong, body and soul, in life and in death, to my faithful Savior, Jesus Christ. He has fully paid for all my sins with His precious blood and has set me free from the tyranny of the devil. He also watches over me in such a way that not a hair can fall from my head without the will of my Father in heaven. In fact, all things must work together for my salvation. Because I belong to Him, Christ, by His Holy Spirit, assures me of eternal life and makes me wholeheartedly willing and ready from now on to live for Him. Friends, fear not. Romans 8:31. What then shall we say to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also with him graciously give us all things? Who shall bring any charge against God's elect? It is God who justifies. Who is to condemn? Christ Jesus, the one who died. More than that, who was raised, who is at the right hand of God, who indeed is interceding for us. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or danger or sword? As it is written, for your sake we're being killed all the day long. We're regarded as sheep to be slaughtered. No. In all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I am sure that neither death nor life nor angels nor rulers nor things present nor things to come nor powers nor height nor depth nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus our Lord. Pray with me. Father, we thank you that through the gospel, through Jesus Christ, you are for.
All right, there is the sermon preached at a church here in Abilene, Texas, dealing with the coronavirus, using the book of Romans, what it teaches us about a pandemic. Some very good points, done in a very much more calm way than I would do it, but that's okay. I find it very interesting that he did recite part of the Heidelberg Catechism at the end. I thought that was interesting because we did the same thing. I would be interested, though, to know, I don't know a lot about this church, but I'd be interested to know how often they've studied the Heidelberg Catechism in that church and how many people in the church even know what the Heidelberg Catechism is. I've known people who've gone to that church, and I don't think they know what the Heidelberg Catechism is. So I don't know if he just... I find that interesting. So hopefully maybe they'll start studying some church history and study the Heidelberg Catechism. That would be great. But there you have it. That's just an example of how you can listen to my sermon on how we handled it. That's how a church here in the local area handled it. Probably your church handled it. Probably most churches addressed it. I know there were some churches saying, "No, don't preach on the COVID-19. Come on, don't give into the hype. You need to preach the word. You need to feed the flock." But you can feed the flock by having them think about a major issue happening that's affecting their life in a biblical way. We want Christians to think biblically. Here's how I'll end this. I think this is important. If you are a Christian, there is a global pandemic going around, and everyone's life is being turned upside down. I've got a news story here right now that that there are some restrictions that they are suggesting the CDC. That I don't know how these are going to be implemented. I don't know what each state is going to do, but you've got some things coming to your life that's going to really impact your life. It's going to impact your church. It's going to impact your children. It's going to impact your children's education. It's going to impact your employment. It's going to impact your life. And so we need to be thinking biblically about this. We need to be handling ourselves in a godly manner. We need to try to be salt. We need to be light. We want to glorify God in everything we do. We want to ensure that we care about information and facts. We want to stop the rumors, the conspiracy theories. We need to really, 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 really think about everything carefully. And listen to sermons being preached about it. See what godly wisdom you can gain, what insight you can get. Be challenged to think about it biblically. Yes, you're going to want to think and study about other things as well, but at least make sure you have not only the right way of thinking, but the right way of acting during this time. Look to love your neighbor. Look for ways to serve your neighbor. Look for ways to help people, to serve people, to show them the love of God. And let's let the church rise up and be what we should be during a time of, some may call it global panic, but we can definitely say global concern. There is global concern and worry in the lives of many. And let's demonstrate the most godly attitudes we can in everything we do. All right, that concludes the sermon review. Someone gave me the sermon to listen to. I wanted to go a different direction, but whenever people contact me, they get to control of the program, the people who contact me. So thank you. This person actually is in my church, but thank you to her for sending this to me. It was interesting. The Heidelberg Catechism at the end was a little bit surprising, and some good points there. A little bit of criticism on the sovereignty of God thing. That is so common in churches, throwing it out there like, hey, this takes care of all of our problems, and not realizing the million questions it also opens the door to. So, all right, that's the beauty of listening to different churches and how they're handling this, and it gives you something to think about and to meditate on. All right. There, you can email me at newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. We'll be back with a live broadcast in just a minute to wrap up some of today's news in regards to the coronavirus. All right, everyone have a great day. God bless. You want to say bye? All right, 1 second. We have another bye.
Bye.
I say thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
All right. God bless.